Uncle Trump has one shot, one opportunity to stop the death of America. One moment with the freedom of vengeance. But what do you with, young? Vivek's palms are sweaty, his next big job. But I got more. If shame tried to fade me, but I got more. Glory to God, praise the Lord. Now we have an author from across the pond in the UK who's written a really frightening article about a genetic arms race, the truth behind China's artificial womb and superhuman engineering claims. And this is pretty, and let me just mention that our guest, Mary Coe, who lives in the UK, she grew up in France and in England. You served in the military in the UK. You and your husband have been missionaries, Ken, and you have been missionaries in America and Europe. And you've worked in producing movies and documentaries, and you've written articles about child trafficking by government and NK Ultra and all kinds of other, some pretty scary topics. But thank you for coming on the MAGA Kingdom Report.
Oh, it's an honor. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so when you sent me this article, I think this a month or two ago, I was pretty shocked. And let me just show everyone the article so they can see this. Yeah, so here's about this is in Medium, genetic arms race, the truth behind China's artificial womb and superhuman engineering claims. So, Marie, I would like to ask you, are we in a genetic arms race with communist China?
Yes, we are. And China is advancing very rapidly in terms of genetic engineering, biotechnology, weapons development using biotechnology. I would say yes. I mean, many countries around the world are now focusing on developing this artificial womb technology, which is very real. And definitely you have China taking the, you know, considerable steps towards developing that. And as you can see, they've already developed some kind of AI kind of controlled artificial womb where they kind of grow fetuses from basically from animals right now. They haven't yet moved onto human embryos. But this is what they're doing, and it's also what the West is doing, but not using technology like that yet. Not using AI and things like that.
So, I mean, the trouble is, I think here in America, I think most Americans, the idea of growing a baby in 60 days with no human mother is not something that we believe in, right?
Absolutely not.
On the other hand, in terms of a military conflict, we have to deal with the reality that our adversary, look, we don't want to fight a war with China, but sometimes you're dealing with a bully who wants to beat you up, even if you don't want to be fighting the bully, right? So
that's right.
So, and I mean, there are these ethical issues. You know, you're growing up a, I guess it's a human being within 2 months and raised by an AI robot of some type and genetically engineered and for military purposes. And this is not something that we believe in, but we also have to have a response of some type without becoming like our enemy, right? So,
Well, this is straight out of The Matrix. This is a horror movie that we're living in. If
yeah,
in fact this is really going on, which
yeah,
I believe Marie in her research and what
yeah,
they discovered in Harvard, and thank God for whistleblowers.
right.
My question is this: what are the legalities of trying to play God? Because there should be laws implemented that would, you would think, that would try to curtail craziness like this. I mean, it's one thing to say if, you can't have children, that maybe there is an exterior incubator that can hold, that can grow your. I mean, I'm all for that to help a family because I think God wants you to protect life. But
That's right.
creating life and manipulating life for your own purpose, that goes way beyond what we would expect as normal or
That's
decent.
right. Yes. So here you're really stepping into Brave New World, which in his book, uh, Huxley talks about genetic, like genetic engineering and growing babies in artificial wombs. They call
Mm,
it ectogenesis. And this is when you grow a baby in an artificial womb from embryo to full term, like, 40 weeks. And so when you look at the history and all these writings
mm,
from the past, from past authors, you can see that there's some sort of playbook that they're following. I mean, we know that Julius Huxley, he was a eugenicist, he was also into genetics, and he's the one who coined the word transhumanism.
mm,
So here we are looking at a, yeah, like you said, science fiction, and we've seen stories like this of external wombs in science fiction movies. Like you see that everywhere, like in the
mm,
in the movie Mother, which you
mm,
can see on Netflix, really portrays that, as well as, like you said, the Matrix. In the Superman movie, you see these artificial wombs that
mm,
they grow in. So it's it's really exploited in Hollywood, actually, in these dystopian movies. And so when you look at these past authors, you can really see that there's some sort of playbook that they're following, because this whole history of artificial wombs is actually very old. It comes from ancient times, and it's kind of like continuously being followed until today. Like you've got, like I can talk about, like in the writings of Mahabharata, there's a story of a prince. She's a queen called Gandhari, and she gives birth to a lump of flesh, and her sage divides this into 100 pieces, and they grow into princes in jars.
mm,
So there's a mythology and history behind this all transhumanist ideas. And you've got like the story of Zeus who gestated his two children inside his body. And so you're talking about a man giving birth to children. I know these are this is mythology, but this is what they're into, the transhumanists, the futurists. And then you back in the 1900s, you have once we have the development of incubators for premature babies, and this became kind of like the stepping stool to develop um, artificial wombs that, like they see it in the medical field, they see it more like an enhanced neonatal care system.
mm,
So because there's two types of artificial wombs, there's you have ecto what they call ectogestation, where you basically put a premature baby into an artificial womb so that it continues to grow. So the idea is to help women who who may have like a disease or something, and they cannot continue to carry the baby. So the surgeons can then transfer the embryo or the baby into an artificial womb to continue to grow. So there's that medical aspect. But then there's the other type of artificial womb, which they call ectogenesis. And ectogenesis is when you grow a baby, and it begins with an IVF, in vitro fertilization, and you let it grow in an artificial womb for the entire gestation. So there's these two types of, but this idea of ectogenesis is actually very old, and it's not until the 1920s when scientists like J.B. Holden, who's a British guy, comes from Oxford, a big mind, you know. He studied pretty much everything: biology, eugenics, genetics, physiology, you name it, he was doing it. And he's the one who coined the word how do you say ectogenesis? Yeah, there's all these words, right? And so from his from he was also studying embryology. So they were doing a lot of experiments back in the 1920s, and he wrote all these papers on science and the future and what science will look like in the future. And he was already talking about ectogestation, ectogenesis. He was already talking about IVF and freezing over, you know, freezing
Fertilized eggs. Yeah.
yeah, ovarian eggs, and so that, you know, all these experiments could be done. So this is something that's been around for some time, and the ideology is incredible because all this science is based on very on the Darwinist ideology. You know, from that kind of the
Right.
evolution, and
Right.
also it's based on very left-wing politics like Marxism and communism. So you can see where this whole
Yeah.
history of
Yeah.
technology.
It's a paradigm.
Yes.
The communism. They
Mm,
look in the Judeo-Christian civilization. We care about truth, right?
that's
There's
right.
certain values, love. I mean, these comes from Jesus, basically, right?
Yeah.
Communism. They don't believe there's a God. They don't believe there's eternal spirit.
Yes.
They and it's really as you pointed out, they believe in the Darwinian model of survival of the fittest, and they see their society as more likely to survive because they're willing to do anything. You know, in the Indo-Pacific Conference that Anastasia and I attended, it was mentioned, I think General Charles Flynn mentioned this, that China would be willing to sacrifice 200 million to 300 million of its own citizens
Yeah.
to accomplish, you know, military victory. That's more than, that's nearly the population of the United States. They're willing to have people die in huge numbers. It doesn't really matter to them. And we
Yeah.
saw this, how they treated their citizens under COVID, which they exported to the rest of the world, which was many people believe is a bioweapon, right?
Mm.
But let me share. Let me just share quickly this 2-minute clip.
According to our source, China is now using artificial wombs to grow full-term babies in just 2 months. 2 months. But it's not just the speed, it's what they're growing. Genetically engineered humans programmed before birth to be stronger, faster, and smarter than anything the natural world could ever produce. So imagine children's preloaded to speak 5 languages, an outfit like NFL athletes. Imagine armies of them, because that's what this is, an army. China isn't just tampering with biology, they're building a biological force, one they plan to unleash on the world. Our sources told us that these programs are backed by China's military and biotech sectors and supported by artificial intelligence systems so advanced, even the CIA officials at Harvard program called them a moral nightmare. One top-level intel officer reportedly said this, and I quote, "I don't believe in God, but what I saw in that room was playing God. And if we don't do it, China will win. But if we do it, we might destroy ourselves." So that's the choice we're being forced to make: moral suicide or national suicide. And let that sink in. Now, here's where it gets even more dangerous. China is reportedly using artificial wombs monitored by AI systems, what they call nanny programs, to grow embryos without any human involvement. No mother, no father, just tubes and control panels. Our insiders said they've already been experimenting on animals, even primates, and that human trials, they may already be underway. And while the rest of the world, America included, is still fighting over pronouns and electric cars, China is quietly engineering a generation of superhumans. They're editing DNA to increase intelligence, to boost strength, to eliminate emotion, and they're doing it faster than any regulatory body can do. So I don't say this lightly, but this is a national security threat of the highest order. Let me say that again. China's artificial womb and genetic modification program is a clear and present danger to the future of civilization.
Say, Richard, I'm glad you showed that video, because as I'm listening to Marie and as we're discussing this, you connect the dots with a lot of facts. This morning I was reading on, we're here located in Pennsylvania, in case the folks didn't know, but there's some laws that there's some bills they're trying to pass into law, which happens to be abortion till birth, so which is disgusting. And you would say to yourself, well, why are we minimalizing life so much? Why would we want to do it? We're going to fight it. We're going to beat that bill. But there seems to be a plan when you look at the entire picture, Richard and Marie, which is demoralize real life and what that means, the beauty of
Right.
what God created. And then you have this COVID vaccine, which now we see years later has caused sterilization in healthy young people.
That's true.
Right.
And
There-
oh, all of a sudden we have this new, ectogenesis that may say be our savior. Wow, what a coincidence.
No, it's good. But actually, there's a study in Ontario. It showed that pregnant women who took the COVID vaccine had a 17% higher rate of miscarriages. And
Yes.
then there was a Dutch study which showed that it was high. It was a 21% increase of young men with poor sperm count, with sperm that were not mobile enough to fertilize an egg. So it does seem that there's this anti-natalist agenda. They're even calling women persons with ovaries. I
Yeah.
mean, the language itself is very strange. And I think you're right. I think that there's an agenda to look, it's not going to affect us in this call right now, but for children raised with this very strange way of thinking, it can really change their understanding of reality.
Yes, exactly. And there's a book out called, well, it's been out for a while. It's called Countdown. It's by an epidemiologist called Shauna Swan, which worth reading. And she predicts by the year 2045, the sperm count in males will drop to almost zero.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, and so she in her research she shows that 50% of the sperm count in males has declined in the West since 1973. 50%,
Mm,
right? And so here in the US, 1 in 8 couples is affected by infertility. 1 in 8 couples.
mm,
That's enormous.
right.
And so we were talking about China right now and, willing to kill their own citizens in order to achieve their goals. Well, their fertility rate has gone down uh, uh, from 2.1 to 1.0 almost.
Mm,
Yeah, and in the US, the birth, which is in the US, it's 1.6, and in Europe it's lower than that. So what we're seeing is absolutely true. The fertility rate is really going down. So you've got that going on, and like you said, Anastasia, the timing of these artificial wombs is not no coincidence.
Well, here's the other thing. They're finding studies now all around the world where you have folks who didn't take the COVID vaccine and they're going in for heart conditions, possibly, and they're finding spike proteins in their bodies.
Yes.
You're also finding children who were born during that time where their parent, well, luckily they survived, um, but that they shared the placenta. They were fed by the parent who took, where science told them at that time the child would not be effective, and they're finding spike proteins in these children. So there is a strong case of shedding that you could try to do everything right. You could eat organic. You could try to
Mm,
stay away from radiation. You could
yeah.
try to all the pollutions in the world. But the reality is that you can't stay away from your family or from people,
Yeah.
right?
mm.
So there are things that we're being affected about that we can't control because of the environment that has this toxic environment that's been created. So you do have people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. who's fighting here,
Right.
but what can we do to try to have our governments, possibly this administration here in the United States right now, to try to deal with this, especially on a global level.
Mm,
Look, I mean, and there's the threat of very powerful corporations like Pfizer, Moderna, other
Mark,
corporations that Merck that are creating substances based on mRNA technology that have not been evaluated for safety. They shoved it down our throat during COVID, and I think that's a train that we have to stop one way or another. I think there's a lot of a battle going on within the Food and Drug Administration, uh, Department of Health and Human Services, and we don't see, it's behind the scenes. But like you said, I think RFK Jr. is trying to slow this down. I mean, for instance, I believe they are trying to change the child vaccination recommended schedule, right?
absolutely.
Yes.
That's exactly what they're pushing right now. We have Florida, which is the first state to remove the mandatory recommendation for childhood vaccination. It's a first step. It really is because when you compare our country to every other country, including third world countries, we are number one in children's chronic health conditions, um, death, prenatal issues, and also SIDS, which no one knew what it was about. All of a sudden, our, vaccination lists grew in numbers, as far as how many vaccines you could take. And all of a sudden, the
For,
SIDS
for,
created, which is your sudden infant death syndrome. And
right.
yet they don't want to make the correlations. Well, guess what? Now the science is coming out. You have people like in our government, like Senator Johnson, who is supporting the idea of, wow, look at the science. These COVID vaccines have caused more deaths. Why did they lie? So everything is being uncovered. We're not seeing it in your regular news, which is detrimental. I'm sure
mm.
you, Marie, being in Britain, can probably say a thing or two about, media coverage right now in your country as
There's
well.
zero, absolutely zero. The news that we get is so, one-sided, and they never tell the truth. You have to listen to alternative news to get your news. You have to listen to doctors online who are
Mm,
trying to spread the message. But slowly, people are getting, are beginning to understand now, because so many people all around me where I live have chronic illness, and I knew them before, all the COVID uh, pandemic, you know,
Mm.
started, and they were fine. They were not suffering from dementia. My father-in-law was perfectly fine. They didn't listen to my husband and I when we told them, well, maybe you should take it slow. No, they didn't do that. They listened to all the propaganda on the BBC News, and they fell for it. All our friends, our family members, everybody took it.
Mm.
And we sent letters. We told everybody, maybe you should do some research first, just slow it down a little bit. But no, they took it. And now I don't know how many members of my family have dementia.
Mm.
It is no joke. And I
Wow.
have friends who suddenly got very sick with all kinds of strange things happening to them. I've literally seen people drop dead on the floor on walking outside my house. I've seen kids puking all over the place. This was happened right after all the shots came out. So it was awful. It was absolutely awful. And no, there's no real news here. And plus, on top of that, they censor everything.
Right.
They censor people. Whenever you try to tell the truth, they shut it down. It's
Mm.
really bad here.
And here in America, the doctors have been threatened with loss of their medical license to
Yes,
practice medicine, lost their privilege to send patients to certain hospitals, and they really have a lot of power to destroy, and of course, deplatformed, right? So if you
yes,
posted a video on YouTube or some other platform, they just erased it.
yes.
And it is really, and then I think it also fits in with this agenda in Europe to bring in millions of people from third world countries who do not share the same
No.
Judeo-Christian values, who may have hatred for certain religious groups, and they're bringing them in by the boatload,
Yeah,
basically.
absolutely. And they do not share the same values, and it's really sad what's happening here. I do not recognize this country at all.
Yeah.
And and the people that come in, they just follow whatever the government tells them to do. There's because they are receiving so much benefits from the government.
Right,
So
right.
and people who do try to say something, they get pushed to the back. So it's not a good situation here in the UK or in Europe as a at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my country, Greece, it is unrecognizable with all the Muslims who've come in. And we're people of faith, but we also believe, love thy neighbor, right?
Yes,
So the problem is if your neighbor is not doesn't feel the same way. It's a totally different culture. I remember and I was thinking about this the other, I was 8 years old when I would walk with my friend to school. The school was 4 blocks down in New York City where we used to live. And I was thinking about this because my mother would walk us. And there was one day my mother couldn't. I said, don't worry, I'm big enough. I could walk. And I did. And her father, who was a Muslim, made advances to me, and I was
Mm,
8 years old.
wow.
okay.
And of course, I just thought he was crazy. And I told my mother, and she's like, "You're not allowed to go by there anymore," and that type of thing. It never occurred to me that this was more of a possibly a religious or cultural indoctrination that, many men are accustomed to believing what Allah, what Allah supported, right? So, now that I'm older, I put these
Yeah.
pieces of my life together, these experiences, and I'm like, that is not definitely not assimilating to a culture that protects and defends the family and
No.
rights of the individual. And the fact that they're allowing that in Europe, Europe, in my opinion, was the experiment, the great experiment before hitting the United States. I really believe that, unfortunately.
And,
Yes,
and
absolutely. And you know, the part of the agenda is to sexualize children. It's all part of the playbook when you look at the book Brave New World, and also there's another author, she wrote a book, actually she's, you know, uh, J.B. Haldane's wife. She wrote a book called Man's World, and she really depicts how that kind of future world he's that the transhumanists want to build is devoid of human rights, devoid of morals. They encourage children to have sex at a very early age. So, like you just said, this is what we are seeing, because um, it's happening more frequently than ever before. So there's this agenda behind all this migration because it's changing the geopolitics, it's changing the culture, the Christian culture is totally being eroded here in England, and so there is this sexualization of children that's coming in, and you've got this transformation of the human being, that's happening before our eyes. If
Right.
people are willing to castrate their children, then
Right.
we're really moving into another stage, in humanity right now.
Certainly satanic.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you study the writings of the transhumanists and which Dr. Panzer wrote extremely well in his book Genesis 128, uh, and the enemies. This is it. You explained really well about how this whole satanic playbook is being played out, and it's being played out right in front of our eyes. And it's not just the fact that they're injecting us with all these chemicals in our bodies and we don't know what it's doing to us, especially to our children. You know, that we're seeing now how much infertility is at its peak. It's never been this bad before. So obviously we're doing something bad. We're injecting stuff in our bodies, which is affecting fertility. And also, even if you do get pregnant, you have a very high risk of having a premature baby. Now, when you have a premature baby, that baby has a 50% risk of not making it if you're born at an age of 23 to 24 weeks. This survivability is quite low. And if those who do make it often end up with morbidity problems, all kinds of diseases and health issues because they have, when you're that small and tiny, you're breathing in air when your lungs is not designed to breathe air at that stage, right? You're breathing in embryonic fluid from from your uterus. So we're creating a situation here where we are completely losing track of human life. It's absolutely insane.
You hit something very important because all of us have someone or have experienced or in our family have recognized modern medicine. There's a lot of good there. My husband and I had suffered from a sterility, not sterility, but infertility issues. And we ended up, the story ended well for us. We were able to have children very late in life, but we never gave up. But, I have a sister-in-law, she gave birth to a 2 pounds, 8 ounce son. And they gave him the Hep B vaccine. You're talking
Mm,
about like a piece of bread, like a little chicken. Okay. And, he ended up becoming autistic. He had neurological damage. They say, oh, because he was premature. Well, there's a lot of premature, so my feeling is, I think to our audience, and when you're listening to Marie talk and read her article, read Dr. Panzer's book, do your own research.
Yes.
Use your logic and reasoning, because most people say, but why would the government do that to me? Snap out of it, okay?
Right.
Life is so precious. It's okay to say no and to have faith over fear. I mean, how many times have we said that, Richard? Faith over fear,
Right.
and do the right thing, because you're not going to have another shot to save your family, your life, your children's life, and the humanity of the future. So, we need to stand up. More people need to know about the ectogenesis and these horrific things that are occurring right now, and stand up to your government.
Mm,
Okay.
that's right. And I think it's really important to go over because there's a lot of Christian groups that have been tackling this for a while, and they've come up with some very important points, which I think might be good to mention here. I'm going to kind of read them out to you because I'll just read a few. But the thing with ectogenesis, if this ever plays out, and and some futurists are saying that ectogenesis will be functional by the year 2045. Some are saying 2070s, but that's not so far from now, right? When you think about it. So
Right.
it's pretty scary. So these are some of the concerns that Christians are talking about right now. So they're saying that if you um, use ectogenesis, first of all, you need IVF. Now, the problem with IVF is that uh, there are many spare embryos. And what many times happens with these embryos, they either get destroyed. And we as Christians, if we believe like life begins at conception, then that embryo is alive, right? This is a person in there. uh, so there's this concern that there's going to be the throwing away of embryos and more experimentation on embryos because there are people who donate um, sperm and egg and embryos to companies who store them, and they allow them to use it for experimentation or for to donate to a couple who want to have a child. So there's a whole IVF industry,
Mm.
that exists out there for fertility. And so they are very concerned about destroying human life. So that's one aspect. And then I think the thing that worries me the most is the commodifying of children. In a way, the IVF industry has already kind of done that because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. I think it's a $36 billion industry worldwide. And they estimate that this industry is going to keep on growing and reach about $70 billion
Mm.
by 2030. So that says a lot about where we're going in terms of our
Well,
infertility issues.
they want to replace women. I mean, I'm sorry to say this, but
Yeah.
they want to, I don't, maybe replace is too strong, but they definitely want to diminish the
Mm,
role of women as mothers. For
exactly.
This
sure,
is
for
why they
sure.
can't answer what a woman is. That's why,
Exactly.
Richard. You're 100% right.
Yeah. Yeah,
That
because
is
it
so
conflicts
true.
with their agenda that they don't want to tell us about. And,
Absolutely.
you know,
And also it's all about destroying the family. It's about destroying what it means to be a husband and wife, to raise up beautiful children, God-centered children. It erases the value of a human being. It's made by God. So, which is, I believe, is part of their agenda, so that we all just become individual human
right.
beings. We're grown in artificial wombs, and we are genetically engineered and programmed through injections and through gene manipulation. They have a a modern technology today called CRISPR. I'm sure you've heard of it, that they use for, genetic to genetically engineer your genes so that they can create designer babies. So can you imagine such a world where you can literally add or take away genes in order to manipulate the traits of your child?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
that
there's no
well,
God. You become the God.
where is
Right.
God in that? God is really a deep part of what it means to have children, to bear children. So when you when you have a couple or an individual who decides to have a baby through artificial womb, they can decide what that baby is going to do in life. The parent becomes the controller of that child. You become the person who decides the destiny of your child. It's no longer in God's hands.
Right.
You see what I mean? So it's really a really terrifying thought that that these kind of things are developing, and they are hell bent on doing it because there's so much profit behind it. Once this thing gets going, it's going to be just like the IVF industry,
Right.
because when the IVF started, um, at the beginning there was a lot of angst about it. There was a lot of debate about this, and people were complaining. But now, Christians were not happy about it because they were concerned about the damage of embryos. But now, it's absolutely normal, right? So
Well, here's the thing. They take human pain and suffering. When a
yes,
couple gets married, it's manipulation. When a couple gets married, why do they get married? Because they love each other? Well, because they want to have a family, right? This
yes,
is typically
exactly.
very normal. And I'll take the perfect example, my husband and myself. We got married, we were right after college, and we couldn't have kids for 15 years.
Hmm.
So if you would ask me when I was 20 what I thought of in vitro, I would tell you it doesn't sound something that we should support as Christians, you know. But once you're in that boat and you're 40 and you're not having children yet, and your clock is completely ticked out. So we did in vitro several times. I would have kept I had all the eggs put in. I would have been happy to have triplets. Trust me, we would have embraced, we were so desperate. And
Yes,
this is how people feel, when they
yes.
want so desperate to have a child, that God brought this science to help me. Well, it ended up not working out. We ended up natural. But my whole point was, how can I now say, in going through that in vitro wasn't bad, but they take something good and they manipulate it and make it the norm.
Exactly, exactly.
And they do that with everything.
That's absolutely true. So they manipulate your feelings in order to get what they want. So this is a big problem, a big issue for Christians to think about. And I think that when these technologies come about, for us, for our community, we have to really pay attention to what they're using, and how they're doing these experiments or technologies. So we have to really do our research before making a decision. I think that's really important, because I think this kind of technology is so wow. It's going to affect everyone,
Yeah.
absolutely everyone in the whole world. And when it comes out, yeah, like you said, who's not going to want to say no to that?
Mm.
You know, uh, if you can't have children and you're desperate to have a child, you're going to do whatever it takes. And
Right.
so, but my thought on this is that if you find a solution that works for you, that is morally fine for you, then you can go ahead and do that. But I think we really have to research deeply when it comes to artificial wombs, because we
Yes.
don't know what they're doing. Because when you study about genetic engineering and the manipulation of genes, I mean, there's a very fine line here. What if they add a gene from a different genome that is not human, to to
Right.
to create a certain trait or to achieve a certain goal in an embryo? I mean, is that moral to do that?
Is
Is
that
it?
human? Is that, look,
Are you still human at this point? I don't know. It's
yeah,
very confusing to me. That's why I think it's important to have these discussions.
right. Okay,
Mm.
you've succeeded in scaring all of us
So sorry.
completely, I have to say. But I do want to encourage everyone to read Marie Ko's article on Medium. Uh, yeah, just look, I guess just search for your Marie Ko, Koh, on medium.com, and you can read the article. And I believe, Anastasia, you have a scripture of the week to
Yes,
share.
yes,
Let me.
this is, I think, very apropos, a little bit depressing, but you know what? We really have to hit this one home. So this is from Revelation 13, 14, 15. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast,
Oh,
so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. And of
wow.
course, this is from Revelations, the end of times, and something to really think about because we know how old the Bible is. And it seems to be all becoming true, unfortunately.
Yes. The technologists and the futurists all say that we are living in the hybrid age,
Mm,
also known as the golden age. So we are living in at a time where all the emerging, technologies are coming together. Like
mm,
you've got AI, you've got genetics, nanotechnology, you've got ectogenesis, you've got robotics. So it's the hybrid age. We're coming at a time where people are exploring these different things, and they're starting to merge.
mm,
So we've got Elon Musk with Neuralink and Optimus Arm. How you can control the machine through thought by implanting a chip in your head. We're already there.
mm,
So you know,
And how did it start? Can you bring sight to a blind man and they put a chip and now that person can
yes,
see? So it
yes.
sounds like, oh my gosh, this is the most wonderful thing on the face of the world. But
right.
they always take it further and they manipulate it.
Exactly that. So when it comes to ectogestation, you begin with something that's really good, right? You want to save lives. Ecto gestation can save many babies and mothers.
Mm,
But then once you've accomplished that goal, then you can move on to something else, right? And that's gonna
right.
be the next best thing, which
Right.
is ectogenesis. So that's a slippery
Well,
slope.
Marie, thank you so much for your
Oh,
strength and
you're
for your
welcome.
research and
Mm.
trying to get the word out. We hope to have you on again. If encounter anything, please keep us abreast.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. It's
Yeah,
my
there
pleasure.
are, she has written articles about sex trafficking and child human
mm.
trafficking. Maybe we can invite you back to talk about that as well.
Sure.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you
Thank you so
again.
much.
Uncle Trump has one shot, one opportunity to stop the death of America. One moment with the freedom of interest. But what do you see with y'all?